G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do another video on muzzle brakes. Start off with, a muzzle brake works in the very simple using Newton's law. It's as simple as that. What that means is for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And in the place that makes sense of in a rifle to start off with, it's basically talking about recoil. When we have the firing of the cartridge and the projectile and the gases all fire out this way, it pushes the rifle that way. That's what recoil is. So this happens in extremely fast, and a lot of that momentum it takes a little bit of time for it to actually push back and push against you. And largely the projectile has left the barrel, not completely. The process starts at that instant. That starts going that way. That starts going that way at that instant. But a muzzle brake, what starts to happen the moment this thing happens is that the gas in front of the projectile starts rushing out in a real hurry, and then the projectile and then all the gases go out as well. What those gases do is they are coming out. They come out of the muzzle. They're actually traveling at super high speed, thousands of kilometers an hour. What actually happens at that point is that gas it's coming out, comes straight out, but it expands instantly. It's gas, so the moment it gets out of the bore, it starts coming out at an angle. It starts coming out like a cone shape. And so what that does is that there's Newton's law. The gas is traveling at thousands of kilometers an hour. When it hits this wall, it pushes the wall. It makes the gas bounce back or out or wherever that wall is, but it hits that wall, and that's the main bit how a muzzle brake works. There's a lot of other details beyond this point, but the main bit is that gas hits that wall, and what was pushing the rifle backwards, well, that gas ends up pushing the rifle forward. So that's the main way that a muzzle brake works. Now is when it starts to get complicated. That wall and how that gas hits it. If it hits it evenly, so it hits it all evenly, so the gas is coming out, expanding, maybe there's a straight wall that hits there, it just pushes the rifle straight forward. The next bit that actually happens is the gas bounces. It's traveling super high speed. It doesn't slow down super fast. So it bangs into that, and then it's going to bang back against the back wall, and it's going to bang in a wider break. It's going to bang forward again. So there's a little bit of efficiencies in how that works. That can actually be counteractive itself. If that wall, what largely happens, it hits that wall and the gas is expanding and it's going out to wherever that port ends up aiming. That's a little bit complicated, so bear with me a little bit. If you take this as the looking down on the muzzle brake, so there's your gas coming out, and you have it hitting against a wall that's actually a V coming back here. There's a certain amount that hits there, but there's a certain amount that hits here. What's actually happening is that gas will end up pushing the muzzle brake even more in a forward, even more reduction, because the gas that's hitting, going out sideways, is also pushing forward. Just like on a pool table, where if you've got a wall shaped like this, the ball coming up here, it's going to bounce off over there. There's the other bit of Newton's law, equal and opposite. If that bounces the gas there, that's pushing the wall forward. So that, in simple terms, means the more angled back your ports are, the more you will have in the way of recoil reduction, because there's more of that happening. There's other ways you can do it. You have more walls in the front, and in a muzzle brake like mine, and I suppose I'll go into my designs, they're very simplistic. They're designed largely to keep the gas off the ground and to blow the gas straight out to the side, is what they're designed to do. That ends up with less gas in your face, less percussion in your face, less dirt on the ground, and what turns out to be very good brakes. Work very well in the way of how consistent and nice they are to shoot, with less percussion and all that sort of stuff, but also seem to be very accurate. And I'll get into that a little bit further as I go. So what I've just discussed there is in the simple stuff, and when you have a straight muzzle brake, which is like one of mine here, or like one of this is APRS's brake, and a lot of brakes look like this. We'll start with someone else's rather than my stuff. That is a straight brake, straight gas out the side, and so that's a very simple system that works very well, nice and accurate. These are side ports, so there's only side points going on. But other than that, it's a very neutral brake. It's simply going to cause straight up recoil reduction. So the recoil is going this way, it pulls it back forward. Straight up recoil reduction and work quite nicely. Mine is not much different to this sort of brake, except for it's wider, which means it stops the gas from going down and up so much, which disturbs dust for prone shooting and that sort of stuff. But that's the simple nature of those brakes. A brake that I've done a lot of work with, and I started with, is this here. Now this is a Hinterland Shooting Supplies brake. There's a few brakes that look like this and brakes that look similar to this. There's a couple of features going on. If you look at that, it's got some angle backward side of things, so it's trying to get some more efficiency in there. The main feature about this brake, which is a point which we'll get into the next place of those angles, of the Newton's law, this has it has an open top and a closed bottom. Now the design of this muzzle brake has been explained in a few different ways. Different companies describe it different ways. There is the keeping the dust off the ground logic that goes with this, because it's got a floor on the bottom of it. There is to stop muzzle rise, because that also ends up causing the muzzle brake pushing down. So for something that's offhand shooting, when you go to shoot it offhand, and you get muzzle rise, well, this sort of brake will tend to stop that. It's going to push back down. Now, in the details of, I suppose there's what that causes. I'll go the two different areas to go into. It's because as the gas bounces off the front wall and then expands everywhere, it gets to bang into something on the bottom, so that pushes the rifle down, and there's nothing for it to bang into on the top. So the gas just comes out the top. And as said, there's a place where that'll work. I'm not a fan for that for precision shooting. I want, in my logic, the less the muzzle moves around during that shot, and as I'll come back to, there's a tiny bit of movement prior to that projectile leaving, and I'd prefer that to be neutral rather than in any direction. And these will cause that. And this is one of the muzzle brakes that I found that I was getting muzzle jump. Yep, this is pushing the barrel down, but I was getting muzzle jump. So muzzle rise. So when I fired it, it would pop up afterwards. What was actually happening when I analysed it properly is the amount of offset they've got in this, in the way of the large holes in the top and nothing in the bottom, or the plate in the bottom, meant that it was pushing the rifle down to make it bounce off the bipod afterwards. And I got some images to show of that, exactly that happening. I did one where I took one of those muzzle brakes and then I cut the holes in the bottom to even it all up, and it stopped doing it. It started to shoot straight, felt nice to shoot, everything worked really well, it just stopped that. The only negative would have been if you were shooting it from the ground in the dirt, in a prone position. In the dirt, you would have got more dust in your face, where this one didn't do that. So yin and yang, and like I said, really depends on what you're actually doing with it. There's various models of what I've done things. I did this muzzle brake here, which is an evolution, which I did with a 338, ended up jumping quite badly because of what you can see here, these same angles on the side. This one was starting to cause percussion, so I had little wings on the back of it to stop it smacking me in the face. Lots of learning I did out of this thing here, and this is how it ended up, but it went through multiple permutations to get to this place. This is a muzzle brake I never actually finished. I built it, I did that sort of stuff with all these ideas in mind, but you can see I have a slight angle up and down to do that same thing. Stopping muzzle rise is before I figured out what was really going on. Probably one of the places that, in this ride, one of the things that I did, and this was before I'd figured everything out, and that was with my 375 Gibbs, which is a 375 Chi-Tac improved. I started off, when I got that, I had this Terminator brake on it. Very efficient brakes, work really, really well, angled backed, nice straight. There's lots of ports in this thing. So these things work, they're very efficient. A lot of people use the Terminator brake and very efficient. I found I was getting a little bit of percussion in my face, nothing terrible, but I was getting a little of that, a lot of gas coming out of my of the gibs. But what I was seeing instantly was dirt was going everywhere. So what I decided to do was I built a shield for this that went underneath. Now at that stage I still hadn't figured this bit out. So I built a shield that went underneath to stop the gas going down. And you'll see there's two things I suppose that are notable. This video here, which is one that I just ran recently as well. This video here, you can actually see how much that rifle is jumping. It didn't jump like that when I shot it just as this muzzle brake. But when I put that plate underneath it, and my logic was simple, it was a plate that was a little bit off the muzzle brake and I just want to stop that gas going down. What I hadn't considered, and I hadn't fully figured out at that stage, is that, like I said, it's not where the gas is going that's causing the problem, it's where it isn't going. So it means something's hitting it. And that's what was happening. That was, bending the barrel on the way down. So very noticeable that the thing I did was terrible, didn't work the way I wanted the rifle to shoot. But the other noticeable bit was, it was still super accurate. If you're doing everything right, it's still accurate. Yes, the rifle's jumping off target and holding you, seeing things, all that sort of stuff is worse. And to be honest, I think if I wasn't doing all the right things in my shooting platform and the way I was shooting, it would have been less accurate. So I don't think it's the right way to go, but it doesn't mean it can't be very accurate. And certainly both with these, the hinterland shooting supply brake, and this one, when I did that, I have seen them shoot super accurately. So for someone who has the rifle set up where this works, and that's where we're about to head, doesn't mean it can't be super accurate. It's just not the way I would tend to go there. Now, I suppose the next break in this little story would be this one here. It looks like nothing at the moment. It's just one of my crude, handmade muzzle brakes. The difference about one here, and you can't really see, is I used to have some holes in the top here. This was for my 338, one of the ones that I changed from this one and decided to go here. And I'd realised with this one, and I think during this process, I'd realised that I had too uneven. If you see these angles on the side here, they were too uneven in the way of the amount that they were pushing, or they were pushing too much gas down. And those angles on the side, I should describe that. See, they're actually pointing up on the sides here. That was taking the gas as it expands. As it rushes out to the side, it's got another edge on the side here to hit. So that edge, as that gas hits that, it forces the gas up, but it also pushes the muzzle down. And that was too much of an angle. This one here, I went with the other way of doing it, which you'll see a lot of muzzle brakes, which are called tunable muzzle brakes. And it's not the tuner muzzle brakes, it's a different thing. It's not talking about having the balance on the front of it. It's talking about having ports on the top that largely you'll see them with screws that you can screw in and out. Not a terrible way to go. If you've got a rifle stock that has it's offset in some form or other, whether it's the shape of the stock, the strength of the stock, or whether you can bet your butt pad or whatever it is, and you're just getting muzzle rise, if you can tune the top of that and hold it down so you can actually get it to the right place, it's the way a lot of handguns work, in the fashion of running the right compensator with, and then tuning their load to get it to shoot back flat for your follow-up. Well, same sort of thing. You can actually tune it with the amount of screws in and out of there. Once again, I prefer to make the rifle shoot flat in all forms, and the muzzle brake is just about the retardation, not about the attitude. But that's not a terrible way to go with the tunable side of things. And that's probably the only way that I think it really works. If you can adjust it to suit, or if it's built to suit, if you can make your own and you can build it to suit, I get there. But otherwise, making it tunable is very important. Now, a little bit of the reason for the video was, one, to explain all these bits and pieces, and it's a little bit of my evolution of understanding muzzle brakes and that side of things. But there's another feature that I don't think many people understand, and that is they see more and more muzzle brakes that are coming out with angled forward ports. So what I mean by that, there's some images here. The port is laid forward. Now that isn't just cool to look racy. Some people might think it is. I've seen them put on the wrong way, where they're pointing the other direction. But what that is exactly the same thing. If you tilt this forward, when it hits, it's going to push the gas up, which means it's pushing the rifle down. So you'll see it where sometimes they'll just have one port that is set up like that. This comes from fully automatic firearms and that sort of stuff, where they're actually tuning and they're trying to stop muzzle rise, to hold it on target through rapid fire sort of thing, and then it's transferred into they look cool, I think, in some places. Not to underestimate that there's some muzzle brake designers that know a lot more than what I'm doing. They know it to the level where they are setting this up deliberately to try and work with different firearms and that sort of stuff. My video is not to tell them how to suck eggs. This video is to help those who don't understand what they're looking at and to make sure they're on the right way. But if you angle forward a port or all the ports, what you're doing is every time that gas hits, it's pushing the muzzle down. Largely, it's not the type of brake I would use, and really it's the type of brake that it's going to have to work for your rifle. It's largely going to be built for a rifle, because that amount of angle forward, if it was adjustable and you could change it, then you could set it up to suit your rig. But when it's set, you can't move muzzle brakes. They're not tunable like that. It means that it's likely to have a movement either down or up. And like I said, it may suit perfectly, or it's offhanded. That's how you're shooting it, and you put it on there so that then rather than lifting up, because you tend to shoot offhand with the toe of the rifle rather than the bottom of the butt pad rather than the top of the butt pads, in the way of getting shoulders and everything lined up. It tends to be here, so there tends to be more muzzle lift in an offhand situation. So then that can actually be helping in that form. And you also don't have the issue of you're sitting over this very stable bipod system where you're moving it, which is what I don't like. I want this straight action. But I suppose I would fine-tune that bit of conversation by saying you do what suits you. And if it works, leave it alone. If it doesn't work and you're looking for problems, then this is a place to look. And if you're screwing on a muzzle brake that has ports that are angled forward, they sure as hell don't go the other way up, because that causes muzzle rise. If you put it the other way around and all of a sudden your ports are shaped like this, then that gas is causing the rifle to go up. Last couple of details I'll get into is, listen, there's a lot more complicated stuff that gets into muzzle brakes, into gas release and pressures on the muzzle and all those bits and pieces, all the things about our crowns and things in the end of the muzzle to try and make things release the bullet and the gases as they escape very even. I've done very little research in it. I'm in the don't fix what ain't broken. I don't have a problem, I don't try and fix it. I think one of the reasons that my sort of muzzle brakes don't have an issue there is they're a nice big chamber and they're not messing with it. They're diffusing that gas quite nicely. There could be other bits and pieces going on with them, with the chamber sizes and the baffle walls and dealing with harmonics and all sorts of stuff. I don't really know. The two things that I would point out, but, is that when you change the muzzle brake, or put a muzzle brake on, or whatever you do at the front there, in the way of particularly changing one muzzle brake to another muzzle brake, if it's not uncommon, it's normal to see a point of impact shift. That's to do with the harmonics and exactly the vibrations exactly at the end of there. Yes, in some places that's going to affect groups. Largely in the systems I use, I don't see it affect group sizes. I just see the point of impact move. So not a stress. If you run into it, don't panic about it. Re-zero it, should be fine. Check it, all that sort of stuff, but that's not uncommon. And the last bit I'd say is, when you do fit a muzzle brake, when you're changing a muzzle brake, when you're fitting a muzzle brake, is check it. What I mean by that, there's a thread on the end of your barrel that might not be perfectly straight. There's a thread inside any muzzle brake that might not be perfectly straight. It might be really, really close to straight, but it might not be perfectly straight. You put two wrongs make a bigger wrong in this situation. Sometimes they make it right, but what I'm really saying is don't trust it as the fact it's screwed on and it looks good. You either use a range rod, you use a thing to make sure it's lined up with your muzzle. You look down and make sure it's lined up with your muzzle. And when you shoot it, the first time you shoot it, you check that it hasn't tagged and done anything. Don't go and shoot 2 or 3 rounds or a dozen rounds or a box of ammo and not work out where you're trying to hit, because sometimes you'll get them tagging. Not a big deal, taking out the size of the hole in the muzzle brake, making it a little bit larger on any muzzle brake. I've never seen it cause any difference, to be truthful. I try and keep them and try and size them to where they're smaller, so look a little bit nicer or look a little bit more appropriate for what the rifle is. But really, I've seen them up to 2 millimeters bigger, so up to 80 thou bigger than what they need to be for the bore, and it's not had any issues. So if you do got to go there, it's not a stress. The main comment is check. fire a couple, check, make sure there's no tagging, look properly around and make sure it's checked. Obviously unloaded and clear and all that sort of stuff before you're checking down that end, but basically check it. Anyway guys, that's like I said, it's like I started with, I'm not trying to say any muzzle brake's right or wrong. There is what I prefer to use. There's a logic to what I'm doing, but this is really more a video to explain what people are looking at. When you're looking at things in the way of whether it's ports and the unevenness of the gas flow, or it's the angle of the baffles in there, and all the different bits and pieces, and do your research. They all have a job. Some are more suited to what you want to do and some are less suited to what you want to do. Anyway guys, that's my video for today. I hope that was of some worth to some people. Thanks for checking in on us, and we'll catch you next time.